Hello everyone. I'm Hayley. I'm the Director of the Economic Security Program at the United States Studies Centre, and this panel is going to be a cracker. It's leading on economic security, AI and critical minerals, and of course, AI and critical minerals are linked. Let me introduce you to our panel. First we have Dr. Jeffrey Wilson. Jeff is Head of Research and Economics for Australia's peak industry body, the Australian Industry Group. He's also notoriously modest, so that basically is where he leaves his bio. I know two further facts about Jeff. One, he was my previous boss at the Perth US Asia Centre as Research Director. That is also our sister institute. And if you look at his LinkedIn profile, you'll see that he is very adept at cultivating rare and unusual flowers. Then we have Mr. Wada Yoshiaki. Yoshiaki-san is a former member of the Japanese House of Representatives. He served 3 terms between 2016 and 2024, representing the Liberal Democratic Party. Prior to that, he served as senior advisor to the Minister for Defence, and before entering politics, he worked for Mitsubishi's automotive business for almost 20 years, but he doesn't look nearly old enough, so I assume some fudging on his resume has occurred. And then lastly, we have Olivia Shen. Olivia is Director of Strategic Technologies Program with the US Studies Centre. Prior to joining USSC, Olivia was the Data Science and AI Strategy Leader for Australia's Department of Home Affairs. And she's also a former Fulbright Scholar, having studied with the Centre for Strategic and International Studies, CSIS, in Washington, DC, where she looked at the ethics of AI and national security. So now you know our panel, let's get into the topic. AI and critical minerals are inextricably interlinked. When Australia's Prime Minister announced that Australia would be establishing a critical minerals strategic reserve earlier this year, he said, "Critical minerals and rare earths are essential inputs to modern and future economy, underpinning the energy transition, high technology manufacturing, AI and the digital economy." Critical minerals are key components of hardware, the hardware that powers AI. This includes high performance computers, data centres, 5 and 6G infrastructure. For instance, data centres are powered by large capacity batteries that are themselves made from lithium, cobalt and nickel. And AI and minerals also come full circle because AI is used to discover new critical mineral mines through satellite imagery and seismic data. Now, because minerals underpin AI, I'm going to flip this session a little bit. We'll talk about critical minerals, then we'll talk about AI. So let's talk about minerals. 18 months ago, I had no idea what dysprosium was. Now I know that it is used in very high temperature permanent magnets. And you probably know that critical minerals are all around us. You will have heard multiple times that they're in your laptop, your iPhone, but maybe you didn't know that when you drove here in a car or got here in a bus, that the glass that you were looking through had lanthanum in it, which makes that glass clear. Really, critical minerals are everywhere. And we're all basically having to become weekend geologists because critical minerals are so central now to geopolitics. But the interesting thing is that critical minerals have been essential for more than a century. In 1916, during World War I, it became clear to the US that it lacked sufficient reserves of 5 minerals: tin, nickel, platinum, nitrates, and potash. I had to look up what potash was. Any guesses, Jeff?
It's a salt that goes into fertiliser.
Correct. That's why you're up here.
Thank you. Pop quiz.
Yeah, pop quiz. So that's more than 100 years ago, and back then in 1916, the US Geological Survey declared that mineral wealth is the foundation of power. And so that is even more true today. Today, critical mineral supply chains are more concentrated than global oil or natural gas, with China dominating the processing of multiple minerals. Just to paint the picture, I've also got a PowerPoint slide to actually show this because, you know, it is the penultimate session of the day. We need some pictures. So let's have a look here. And this is basically just to show, yes, the mining of critical minerals is done in multiple countries, But you can see that the processing and refining is dominated in one country, and that country is China. And that is because over decades it has subsidised the industry and it has really developed the technology. So Jeff, first question to you. You've had a lot to say about critical minerals in the past. How important are critical minerals to the US, Australia, allied countries? And what are some of the challenges that we're facing looking at securing these? Because you can't secure them all.
Thanks, Hayley. And I'm glad you've got this chart up here because that does a lot of this for me. Critical minerals really are the sine qua non of when you're talking about geoeconomics or economic coercion, some of the issues that we've talked about earlier today. These are the test case where these issues are most pronounced. I mean, you've mentioned that they're essential throughout society. We could also add the defence angle to that. There's about two dozen of them, goes into an F-16, particularly things around weapons targeting and avionics systems. And we have this situation where particularly Japan and the US especially, it's a major strategic vulnerability because, as you can see from the chart, and there's about 30 of these different minerals. China has either a perfect monopoly or a very close to world monopoly on these things. Many of you who know history, been involved in the Japan relationship, will know it has form on this. There was a suspension of critical rare earths to Japan for 59 days in late 2010. This is over the Senkaku Islands dispute, Senkaku Shoku, and from that time that really raised the global awareness of the issue at the time, particularly amongst the Japanese system as well. For those of you who are critical minerals neophytes, there's probably three things I'd like you to remember from today. One is that critical minerals are not rare and rare earths are not rare despite the name. They're pretty abundant in the Earth's crust. Lots of countries have supply of a lot of these things. Indeed, if you look at rare earths, the global proven reserves of rare earths are just what geologists have proven in the ground is enough to last for 1,000 years of present consumption. We've got about 150 years of iron ore proven and 60 years of copper. So if you measure it in geological terms, geology is not the problem. Processing is. These are very difficult to handle. It's not like steel or copper or something where you just smelt the product out. They're usually trace elements in rocks that contains lots of other minerals primarily that have to be removed through hydrometallurgic processes. This is very expensive. China has a technology monopoly on this, so you could consider the processing a critical tech, really. Because they're one of the few countries that have subsidised it since the 1980s and said we want this capability, have produced the PhDs, produced the equipment to do it. It also produces a lot of environmental hazards, particularly sulfuric and hydrofluoric acid that are not nice to handle, and I think most people in this room would recognise that not all countries have the same environmental standards for those. The third problem you've got is it is very hard, despite our geology here in Australia, to develop this industry by private sector means alone. Those Chinese monopolies, which are run predominantly by state-owned or state-linked companies that receive significant, near infinite subsidy through the Chinese banking system, supply the world with these minerals at very low prices. In most cases, lower prices supplied to world markets than the basic cost of production you could just to get them out of the ground in a jurisdiction like Australia. This has meant that it's not been a problem for downstream users. The auto industry, the electronics industry, the data centres, they can get all of this. The price is very good. In the short term, you don't have a problem. The challenge is in some of the strategic scenarios we've talked about, what happens when that ceases to be the case, as Japan experienced in 2010. And in the meantime, it's been extremely challenging for private sector entrants to come into the market. We heard from the Ambassador Rudd this morning that there is one company that's ever managed to achieve that. That's Linus Resources in Western Australia, which received significant support from the Japanese government through the Japan Bank of International Cooperation to get there. So in that case, Japan made a strategic investment to manage that problem, which got Linus into the market. We are here 10 years later and we still have one. So the question for Australia and Japan and the United States is, well, what can you do? That's a really challenging question. Japan and Australia have done critical minerals cooperation in 2010. In fact, Kevin Rudd was the Prime Minister when that agreement was signed. There's been an agreement between Australia and the US for the last 5 years as well. But this is really asking these governments to do something that they're not used to doing, which is getting down and dirty into intervening in a highly distorted market and distorting it back towards something that the private sector can carry on with.
Yeah. No, we don't like doing that because Australia's had a bad experience with industrial policy in the past. Let's turn now to AI and Olivia. So obviously Jeff and I have just hogged the mic on critical minerals, but AI is also a highly politicised and competitive industry. Obviously the US and China are in this, not a race, but like a game for AI dominance. So I know you have your own slides too, Olivia. You let me know when you're ready.
Yeah, sure. AI is incredibly important, and we can well and truly say that the war is on, and it's intensifying, right? AI is potentially the most transformative, consequential technology of this century. And it is impacting and disrupting everything, from the most macro of geopolitical issues to the most deeply personal and private interactions with our lives. And because these technologies can be so transformative, the supply chain for particularly the semiconductor chips, which is a critical input to these technologies, is really, really heating up. So if you can flick over to my little slide there, the first one is basically just showing the semiconductor industry, the subcomponents of it, the activities that sit under it, and all the key players. Now, I composed this because I wanted to point out 3 key things to highlight. One is, this is a really complex, multifaceted supply chain. It has a lot of very technical subcomponents, and as you can see, there are countries that are carving out particular comparative advantages up and down that supply chain. Now, not all chips are made equal, but this gives you just a summarized snapshot of how complex it actually is and the different elements of that supply chain. Like, we kind of do this sort of we kind of tar it all with one brush and say, well, this is just the semiconductor industry. There's a huge number of different multifaceted interconnected components to that. The other thing I want to highlight is that, as you can see from the various colors, this is a less monopolistic picture than we saw in the last slide. So the picture here is a little bit more positive. We have a bit more market diversity. We have, as I mentioned, different countries carving out specific areas where they have a comparative advantage. And this leads to my third point, which is that if you look at the countries that dominate, obviously you have the United States as an anchor, particularly for those earlier parts of the semiconductor industry where it's about the design of the chips. But it is also dominated by allies and partners. This is really positive for us. And in amongst the doom and gloom, I just want to highlight that this is already an existing area of allied partner cooperation and federated supply chain resilience. We should not take this for granted. We should absolutely not take this for granted or trade it away. And I just want to hone in on that, because I think when we sort of look at and catastrophize all the areas where we're vulnerable, we lose sight of maybe the things we actually need to protect.
Actually, this is such a helpful chart. I didn't realise how much South Korea dominated memory until this chart, and actually really shows, like you said, how complex it is and who is leading where. Next slide.
Next slide is actually about the demand side. So as you can see, where's the demand going? Huge appetite for integrated circuits in China and Hong Kong/China. So what I wanted this to highlight is these 2 graphs pair up how we have this incredible, I guess, dominance over the supply of this high demand hardware, high value hardware that is really going to impact the AI future and how much we can diffuse these technologies across economies.
Thank you so much for that. That was really helpful as a scene setter. Next, I want to go to Wada-san, because Japan has been mentioned a few times today. Obviously, Japan is a leader in terms of investing in critical minerals to diversify supply. We've talked about Lynas rare earths. Because of Japan's investment, now Lynas is refining heavy rare earths in Malaysia, only the second group to do that after China. But in addition to that, Japan is investing in massive amounts in AI and semiconductors. And before I pass to you, I just wanted to put into context how large the investment is. So Australia has Future Made in Australia, which in US dollars is worth 15 billion. Just in the next 5 years alone, Japan is going to invest $65 billion in 2 things, AI and semiconductors. Wada-san, you know, this session is about leading on economic security. How is Japan leading on AI and critical minerals?
Thank you, Hayley. As Hayley said, Japanese government will invest $6.5 billion for AI and semiconductor. The high-end semiconductor factory has just come up in July 18th in my constituency, Hokkaido. The company is called Rapidus. It is a government-led company. Obviously, there is a private investment, but still the project is run by the government. And the reason why Japan has come back, as a matter of fact, to semiconductor manufacturing is because we fear that if anything happens in Taiwan, then high-end semiconductor, IP and everything, manufacturing capability will be taken by China. And that is going to be slipped out from Japan's hand, American hands, and the hand of Australia. And we cannot allow that to happen. So as an insurance, we need to have top-of-the-class semiconductor made in Japan. Thanks to US design by IBM, we have that technology of gate all around, GAA. With this design, Rapidus is going to mass produce top-class semiconductor from 2027, if everything goes well. And this, how should I say, advancement of semiconductor will determine the strength of industrial power of our alliance, whether we can continue to be ahead of other competitors, especially China, or not. So this project, we believe, is very important, not only for Japan, but also for the alliance at the same time.
Now, I think every country is starting to realise, before President Trump had a second term, we had President Biden, and he invested in the Inflation Reduction Act. And because of that massive investment, countries all over the world realised the game had changed, and we do need to start intervening more in our markets, even if we don't like it, even if that means less efficiencies. So the next segment of this panel is actually some pre-submitted questions from the panel, answers from the panellists to questions that I posed to them about a week ago. They have never seen their answers to the same question, so it's going to be a surprise for them. I'm going to go to the first question, but also what I thought was, there hasn't been a lot of opportunity for audience engagement today, and Jeff told me that he hates Slido. So I was thinking that we could go analog and actually do a show of hands. So what I'm going to do is, you will see the panelists' answers to this, but I would also like to see what the audience is thinking about this question. So what I'm going to do is, I'll ask the question, I'll also give you the possible answers, and then I'm relying on you, audience, to give me a show of hands. You might not be an expert, so I'm actually going to set the scene a little bit with this question. So the question is, by the 2030s, which country will have the competitive edge on both AI and critical minerals? And the reason that's a tricky question is because I think where we're at right now is China has the lead on critical minerals, and the United States has the lead on AI. And the best representation of that is China withholds critical mineral exports, and the US withholds chips. That was up until recently, when the United States decided to ease restrictions on the NVIDIA H20 chips, and China decided to ease its restrictions on rare earth elements. So you can see that there is a competition afoot. But the question is, what's going to happen in the next 10 years? Is the US going to catch up? Is China going to catch up? So the potential answers that I gave to our panelists were China, the United States, and the next answer was both China and the US will control one each. And then the final option was neither, it will be another country. So if you think it's going to be China that will dominate critical minerals and AI in the next 10 years, raise your hand. Gosh, I can hardly see. That's not as many as I expected. Yeah. Okay, if you think it's going to be the United States, raise your hand. Okay. If you think they will control one each, raise your hand. Wow. Wow, that's a lot. So people are not confident that things will change. If you think it's going to be another country, raise your hand. Okay, it's so interesting. All right, let's see what our panelists said. Now, just to let you know too, in the program, we had Catherine Manstead from CyberCX, was originally going to be on the panel but couldn't be with us today. She said neither, So I'm also going to ask our panel to speculate wildly on who could be the other country she was talking about. But look, Jeff and Wada-san, you both said China. Do you have a lack of confidence in the US's ability to catch up on critical minerals, or do you have more confidence that China is just going to obliterate the field? Jeff first.
On critical minerals, this has been really hard, and I can't heap enough praise on Japan because they had a problem in 2010 and the Japanese government spent money to solve the problem. But it uses an economic playbook that's much more common to, what used to be called Japan Inc. back in the 80s. We don't have those systems in Australia or the United States. And, in some of the developments in policy making in the US makes you wonder whether the capacity for that kind of thing might be drifting away with the more ad hoc focus. On AI, we can say that separately, I interpreted the question as competitive edge, not just being able to make and do, but being able to utilise and implement. And there are there's an important discussion separate to whatever the last GPT model can do in terms of processing power and solutions, but how this is going to be adopted in industry. The Chinese industrial system has a lot of downsides, but it has the capability to suck things up and really implement it in a way that we've particularly seen in Australia with our debate over AI. Public surveys say people don't like it being used by businesses, but they confess their privatest, darkest secrets to chat at 10 p.m. at night. Having frameworks and the ability to drive that, I would be concerned, the biggest risk is not do we have the computer, but is it being used in industry for the productivity gains we need from it? I suspect China's ability to suck that up is going to outpace ours.
And Wada-san, why do you think China?
Yes, talking about minerals, if you have seen the current Chinese dominance on mining and processing, it is going to be extremely difficult. And we have to take tremendous effort and time to slice up their advantages. It is just not so easy. And even if we find new mines, those mines are left as it is, because making the business profitable may be very difficult. That's the reason. So in the area of minerals, I think China will continue to have dominance, unfortunately. And talking about AI, in my mind, I wanted to say US. But as you know, Japanese are very pessimistic, so I mentioned China. The level of amount of investment that is going into the area of AI, US has huge advantages. And China is not even close to that. So that is a relief. But if you see the publication, official publication of academic paper on AI advancement, until 2018, US had lead. Then around 2020, China overtakes the US. And today, China is about a triple of the US. If you see the population scale of China and the level of education, plus the flexibility that Chinese government has in terms of shifting budget into certain critical area, I think China may have a good chance of becoming very, very tough competitor by 2030. Yes.
Were either of you surprised that most of the audience disagrees with you?
I actually had the same opinion as most of you.
Can't walk it back now, you've made your decision. Okay, Olivia, you said one each. Tell us which one and why.
I think I just win anyway, because everyone agrees with me.
It's not democracy.
It is a race. I took the view that we would see much of the same as the current scene. And there's a geopolitical reason for that, and there's a technocratic reason. The geopolitical reason is that I think we're all really live to how strategically important these supply chains are, both the US and China. And so they have really strong strategic interests in maintaining, in fact, extending these dominant positions. So geopolitically, I don't see either of them just kind of like giving up the lead, even if one wants to take over that competitive edge. The other element that I thought about, which is much more of a technocratic one, is that the 2030s is not long away. We're talking about a distance of 5 to 10 years. And if I hone in on AI in particular, we're talking about an incredibly precise, scientific, capital-intensive, research-intensive industry that doesn't just develop over the course of 5 to 10 years. Wada-san, I love your comment that when you talk about Rapidus, you're talking about Japan coming back in. Now, Japan couldn't come back in if they didn't already have that base that you've developed industrially over many decades. And it's the same with these really precision technical capabilities. If we look at Taiwan as an example, how is it that TSMC has dominated the semiconductor manufacturing market? How is it that the world's 2 most important chip design companies, AMD and NVIDIA, are both headed up by Taiwanese Americans? I don't think these are happy coincidences. I think this is the ecological product of 40 years of concerted investment in a semiconductor industry and in advanced engineering talent. These things don't happen overnight, and they take a lot of strategic patience.
I mean, Catherine had said neither. Is it possible that there's going to be a wildcard country that is going to dominate either critical minerals? I'd say it would be more likely AI. Is there another country that's going to dominate AI, like a European bloc or India or South Korea? What are the thoughts of the panel? Is there a wildcard option in the next 10 years?
You want to start with me?
Go ahead.
I think Catherine was trying to be provocative and thought-provoking, as she often does. But she is also incredibly wise. I really don't know. I can't see, certainly right now, I can't see someone coming in. But what I would like to remind us all is that the trajectory of these technologies are really hard to predict. So we need to come to this with a level of humility that we don't know what the future might look like. If I trace back 5 years, 5 years ago, did anyone know what OpenAI was? Had anyone heard of Anthropic? Certainly no one had heard of DeepSeek or Moonlight AI. And yet these are the leading American and Chinese companies developing these technologies. So firstly, I think we need a level of humility that we don't know necessarily what the future looks like. But the consequence of that is not that we give up. The consequence of that is that we make decisions and strategic investments that are low regret or zero regret, no matter what the future looks like. So that's one. And the other part is that we shouldn't rest on our laurels and assume that there is an incumbent advantage. If I track back 8 years, I would have thought maybe the leaders in AI would be Apple, Google, Intel even. Sorry.
No offense to anyone from Intel that's here.
But if you look at that trajectory, it's like that there isn't really a clear incumbent advantage here.
That's why it's disruptive, I guess. Okay, so next question for our panelists. Now I asked a question to Jeff and Wada-san on minerals and then one to Olivia on AI. So we'll go first to Jeff and Wada-san. This was the question. Ideally, what percentage should China be involved in Australia's critical mineral sector as a buyer and a mine owner / investor? And just to set the scene so that people understand, what are the current circumstances, there really is no clear figure about what percentage of Australia's critical minerals go to China. However, Australia does export more than 90% of our lithium to China for processing, more than 70% of our manganese, and a very significant majority of our rare earths. So I asked the potential answers for this would be what percentage? As much as possible, less than 75%, less than 50%, and less than 25%. And again, they haven't seen each other's answers, so please have a look. Do you remember what you answered, Jeff? This was a week ago.
I do.
So, Jeff, do you want to start off with this? You couldn't give me my sort of yes/no answer. You've obviously done the academic thing of giving me a more complex answer. But what do you mean by depends on the industry? And obviously you said 0% for rare earths.
Well, critical is a spectrum. If you look at something like lithium, for example, there is a lot of companies involved in this globally. The production's not as monopolised. It's more of a commodity product as well, lithium hydroxide. You can buy it on the London Metals Exchange. A box of it's a box of it. And so it's still critical, but there's a degree of that's important. When you look at something like rare earths, for those of you who are really into this stuff, the heavy rare earths, dysprosium and some of these, I mean, there's a single commercial global source of dysprosium. It's a single mine in the south of Guangdong province at the moment that's Chinese government owned. So if you've got dysprosium in a product, I can tell you exactly on the Earth's surface where it was dug out from. Like, that's an extreme point risk in the global system. For something like that, the reason that we ask this question and we want to develop these products in Australia, because from an economic point of view, a lot of critical minerals, lithium's the biggest one, but many of the others are fairly marginal. Like, in our wildest dreams, the rare earths industry in Australia will be a few % of our iron ore or gas exports. So this is primarily a strategic motivation that we have to be able to enter a market that's highly contested, where we have allied partners who have strategic liabilities who would benefit from us being able to, in a way, alliance burden share on these issues. The premise of that involves changing a monopoly situation with China in it, and if you bring China as an investor, that defeats the point. Yeah.
Wada-san, you said less than 25%, so there should be less than 25% Chinese involvement in our mineral sector.
Correct. Yes.
Tell me more.
Well, as Jeff said initially, in 2010, China has taken critical minerals as hostage against Japan. And at that time, we realized that China is our neighbor, and once in a while, we have dispute over something. And in that case, if we over depend on China, then same thing will keep on happening, and that is going to jeopardize Japan's sovereignty, Japan's independence. So reliance on China should not happen in every sense, especially in the critical areas like minerals, semiconductors, other things. So less than 20% is something that Japan can afford as worst case impact. Anything above 50%, that is going to jeopardize the whole industry. Japan is a country of manufacturing, even though we have given up a lot of production site to overseas. But still, we produce good stuff. And to continue to do so, we have to have decent control over critical minerals.
A quick question without notice, which, earlier this year we heard a groundbreaking decision by the US government to really intervene in MP materials, a mine in California, by giving it significant investment, $550 billion, and also Apple deciding to give millions as well. From a Japanese perspective, obviously you've invested in Lynas. Is there discussions in Japan about getting Japanese industry more involved in paying for some of this critical mineral mining and processing? And what was the reaction to this massive investment by the US in a mine in America?
I think alliance should be there to support the critical supply chain. And the supply chain is the foundation of the strength of the alliance. So Japanese government has also started investing into mines, especially in last 2 years. Lynas Corporation is one example. So Japan has to continue that way. And it is not only the government who has to take this burden. Private sectors also have to do the same for their own sake. So Japan as a whole should participate in investing in mining site, processing factories, together as alliance.
Let's go next to Olivia's question. Ideally, what percentage of US tech stacks should Australia be building on top of? And again, I'm going to give a quick explanation for anyone who, like me, doesn't understand what a tech stack is. When we're talking about a tech stack, we're talking about the layers of technology, including infrastructure, data, and machine learning frameworks that are used to build, train, and deploy large-scale AI applications. And what this question is asking is how much of the US tech stack should be used. And it asks about the US because the US has the major hyperscalers, it's the leader in this industry. The other options would be for Australia to build its own tech stacks or maybe use tech stacks from other countries. So again, I gave Olivia the options of as much as possible, less than 75%, less than 50%, or less than 25%. She answered less than 75%. Olivia, where should that 25% that's remaining come from, and why less than 75% of US tech stacks should we be building on top of?
The 25% should come from sovereign capability and diversifying our supply chains. So we have benefited enormously from US technology transfers to Australia and interoperable cooperation on technology with the United States. They have such a dynamic environment for this innovation, and they are absolutely at the frontier of these technologies. However, I think broadly speaking, we need to look at it from the point of view of building our own capability. And this is where I actually take a lot of inspiration from our regional neighbours who are really leaning into this. 75% I think is about right. And I'm sort of looking at that on sort of a medium time scale as well. I think as we build our capabilities, we should be driving it more. We should be driving at resilience, but also nothing supports our ability to use and diffuse these things by getting our hands dirty and building it ourselves. Jeff mentioned before that Australia is incredibly skeptical about AI. And my take on that is it partly because we're just taking these items off the shelf as opposed to actually understanding it, as opposed to actually looking under the hood and feeling like we have agency and power to actually shape it, and particularly shape the way that it's used in our economies and in our societies. So Hayley mentioned, the tech stack is a composite of many different things. Why should we be relying on large language models that are trained primarily on US data? That doesn't actually make a lot of sense in particular use cases of AI. That's definitely areas where I think we do need to build our own capabilities. And it's fascinating to see countries like Singapore and Korea do exactly that. Or India, for example. India and South Korea have been incredibly ambitious about designing AI and building AI products that are actually customized to local needs and local data. I think there's a huge opportunity for that, particularly as the AI landscape moves more towards open source tools, products, and models and data sets. I think that's a real opportunity where you can actually diversify the supply chain, but also de-risk it. A good example of this is a DeepSeek's R1 model. So some of you would have heard about DeepSeek. It sort of shot into the limelight in January of this year. A really powerful AI model produced by China, despite their lower access to high-performance chips. On Hugging Face, there are now more downloads of derivative versions of DeepSeek than the original DeepSeek model. So open sourcing these products allow you to use it, download it, but then fine-tune it on your own data, customize it for your own local needs. And I think that's a really exciting opportunity that we need to be leaning into.
I'm embarrassed to say I don't know what Hugging Face is.
Okay, Hugging Face is basically just an online repository of code. And so open source developers will share their code on Hugging Face, and it is incredible as sort of an innovative ecosystem that is free and that can be de-risked. So there's actually companies that are specifically downloading Chinese models, fine-tuning it to remove the CCP propaganda guardrail, so you can actually ask questions about Tiananmen Square massacre and get a reasonable response, or Winnie the Pooh. And then they actually serve up these models from US-based servers to its customers. This is the kind of things that are possible in this very diffused kind of technology.
Okay, let's go to the last question that I asked our panellists. Which element of critical mineral supply chains and of tech supply chains are the US and its allies most capable of cooperating? I didn't give them any parameters. They could have picked anything, and here's what they said. So Jeff, I will go to you first. You think that we can work together to buy critical minerals. How so?
Or at least find a way to buy them that's going to make production outside of China cost effective. So look, there has been a clear and deliberate strategy by China to protect its monopoly through pricing mechanisms. This is something, for those of you who are OPEC heads, the Saudis use the OPEC cartel for years. Whenever a new entrant comes in, when you've got a state-owned subsidised producer, you can just cut the price, drive them out of the market and reinstate your monopoly position. There is form for this happening as well with China in the past. After Senkaku shock in 2010, there was Lynas in Australia and what's now called MP materials in the United States. China flooded the market with NdPr. MP collapsed into Chapter 11 in the US, and Lynas survived because the Japanese, through JOGMEC, bailed it out. The fundamental reality is when you have at the moment, secure, on-time, low-cost world supply. Private sector outside of China is not going to be able to do that. So there has to be some change in that product market, some kind of intervention by other governments, individually or collectively, or that's fundamentally not going to change. The ability to get the NdPr price up $70 out of China on the LME about at the moment, that needs to be about $120 before someone outside of China is going to be able to enter that market systematically. And if that we can cooperate, that's where the cooperation needs to go next.
And where I asked Olivia what Hugging Face is, I will let the audience know that NdPr is two types of rare earth elements. Wada-san, you said joint R&D and technology sharing, and you had a second bite at the apple, a multi-sovereign wealth fund.
Go big. I went small, you go big.
Can you expand, how can we work together on joint R&D and technology sharing?
Taking only one part of supply chain doesn't secure our business, our life. So from the upstream to downstream, we have to hold a good amount of shares. And talking about the mining side, I think a multi-sovereign wealth fund can take care to invest, buying existing mines or buying a brand new site. That is possible, I believe. That's what monies are for. And talking about the joint R&D and technology, that is needed for the most difficult part, that is processing. And that is where we do not have advantages. If we gather the wisdom of alliance together, then that may take some time. But one day we'll be able to come to par with China, and hopefully obtain a product that is at the same time cost competitive, so that our business can be secured and sustainable.
And Olivia, to your answer, you said we can most cooperate on AI chips and people. Can you expand?
So the first part is what I mentioned before about maintaining our advantage, and not taking it for granted, particularly when it comes to chips, like the hardware of chips, and then also the data centers. We should be treating it almost as like critical digital infrastructure as opposed to an industrial sector or some sort of commodity. I think that's how we need to perceive of it if we really believe that AI is the most important technology of our times. So there's that element where we already have an advantage. We already have like a stranglehold on the market in some ways, like cooperatively, and China is seeing it as a real bottleneck for their ambitions on AI. We should listen to China. The other part is the AI talent, which I think is a little bit of an underrated input to this industry. China does have a demographic advantage there. They just have a lot of people, but a huge proportion of those people are also educated in science, technology, engineering, and math. And they also have a population that is incredibly ambitious and positive about working and driving an AI innovative ecosystem in China. The only other country I can think of that has those demographic advantages is India, actually. But that's why I think we really need to sort of pool our AI talent and give us sort of a more federated resource that we can tap into. Because as these AI capabilities become more and more advanced, they tend to also become more and more opaque. And increasing the talent pool means that we have more humans, good humans, who are able to steer these technologies in the right direction, who are able to build them well, who are able to look under the hood, and who are able to democratize the benefits of these technologies for countries and for economies. And I think those things are really important for that sort of broader ecosystem. So what does synchronizing AI talent or cooperating on AI talent look like? Well, I think education programs, and the US is already driving very much in this direction, recognition of qualifications, technical exchanges, all of the really great people-to-people stuff. And I think that people-to-people stuff should not be underestimated, because they then feed into really concrete decisions about where to invest, where to work, what companies to work for, where to put your money. It's a huge amount of sort of this idea of business proceeding at the pace of trust. And AI talent will help to build that trust. I also want to add that the other element of that trust is that we're able to sort of federate our intelligence on future supply chain shocks. I think it's it's important to think about how China also thinks about technologies as a way of leapfrogging. So they're always talking about this in their narrative. So we want to dominate mining of critical minerals. China says, okay, we'll go and mine the Mariana Trench for rare earths instead. Or worse yet, we'll mine the places that are incredibly close to Japan's exclusive economic zone. You know, they very much have this leapfrogging aspect. So, okay, so we can dominate the mines that are here on Earth. China will go out and mine an asteroid. This is not the stuff of science fiction. This is stuff they're actually experimenting with. So I think it's important that we look at not just the supply chain shocks or vulnerabilities in the here and now, but that we federate our intelligence. So imagine it's sort of like a coordinated net assessment of supply chain vulnerabilities out into the longer term. Because that's where we're not going to be prone to strategic surprise and we're not sleepwalking into the next supply chain vulnerability.
That is hugely ambitious and would require a lot of coordination, but I agree with you, that would be the ideal situation. We're out of time, but I did want to give our international guest, Wada-san, the final word and just ask you to reflect, Wada-san, on what do you think the next step is for Australia, the United States, Japan, our allies and partners, in terms of these supply chain issues, technology issues. What is the next step from here?
I think what Olivia has said right now is extremely important for the alliance. We have to commonize the goal, commonize the process, and the goal doesn't have to be, a goal should not be the ideology. Goal has to be numbers, how much of what we need to sustain. Such concrete number has to be there. And having commonized the goal and processes, we work together on the same goal. That is what alliance is for, I believe, and especially in the area of supply chain. In session 3, Lavina mentioned about the war game, right? And alliance has lost against China because of the lack of supply chain. It is that important, supply chain is. So, how to beat the risks, how to beat the threat. We have to have the same idea, same goal, then work together. I think that is what we need to do. Thank you. That's
a good note to end on. If you'd like to ask our panellists any further questions, please join us outside for some afternoon tea. But for now, please join me in thanking our panel. Thank you so much.